Welcome to IFS Industrial Intelligence Voices of Industry. Stories from the people building the backbone of the world's industries with AI that actually works. Each episode features IFS experts who've worked on the front lines of industry, in manufacturing plants, energy grids, aircraft hangars, and construction sites. They bring real-world experience to the conversation, sharing what's changing, what's next, and how AI is being applied to make operations safer, faster, and more resilient. Today, I'm speaking with Toby. I will not do a good enough introduction for your background prior to IFS, so Toby, over to you.
Toby Rees, and thank you for having me today to talk to you about trusted AI. My background stems from a 16, 17-year career in the military. Started off in telecommunications engineering, working across systems and services, and then effectively I was there in the military for the shift from analog into digital. So I've already been part of one technological advancement of quite significant proportions. I've then gone on to work across more specialised agencies across that defence space. So within intelligence, within specialist roles such as technical surveillance, and in the latter years of my time in defence, working as a CISO for cyber opportunities, cyber defence and cyber offensive capabilities.
You worked across a number of different organisations, as you've just touched on. I'm just curious, what did those experiences teach you about operating in high-stakes environments?
I think the key thing is you're never going to understand all of the facts, all of the figures in hand from the outset. So it's about understanding where you can pull information from. It's about qualifying data and adding context to inform information and actionable intelligence, and then really operating to a mantra of trust but validate. So sometimes you need to qualify the quality of the information you've got and use that to enable decision making. Ultimately, decision paralysis is not a good place to be. So even if the decision is to do nothing at this point in time, which I know a number of businesses are talking to about, do they not adopt AI? It needs to be an active decision on balancing the facts, understanding the strategy of the business, combining those factors and qualifying their options.
And how does that background shape the way you now think about AI governance and trust?
So, we're in a position where there's a lot of ambiguity, there's a lot of noise in the industry, and what's really difficult in hostile environments that I've operated before or highly contested spaces such as the business market we're seeing now, and choices between multiple vendors and everybody's offering AI now. It's what really is the best for your business. So understanding the context of how you operate, the verticals that we provide AI solutions for are highly specialized. And so actually general solutions probably aren't going to cut the mustard. So it's being clear on what your requirement is, the context according to the application of artificial intelligence, and really the real world business benefit you'll realize when you match up the right solution with your requirement.
And we talk about trust an awful lot, but when it comes to trust by design, what does that actually mean in an industrial context?
So systemic, not cosmetic. We need to effectively conceptualize what trust looks like from governance, ethics, compliance standpoint. We need to build that into conceptualization and design all the way through to client adoption. We need to truly understand the pain points for the customer, the challenges that they're facing, and obviously our industry breadth and knowledge really helps us supporting that, to baking in effectively a trusted solution that meets the pain points, that addresses the customer need, and effectively works in a very, very highly regulated organization or vertical, which can sustain very little risk or damage to any of its infrastructure.
You mentioned baking in as part of that answer, and I'm curious how you feel we ensure that AI remains both explainable and accountable when it's actually operating inside complex workflows.
Yeah, it's very difficult. When we're talking about critical national infrastructure, for example, it's highly regulated, but it's very closely coupled as well in terms of system of systems thinking and system design. And so we need to equally consider the failure points within those verticals and the cascade risk that could occur. So the margin for error is so small, we're not talking about significant points here, we're talking points of points.
And you and I were even discussing this morning, but emerging regulations such as the EU AI Act and standards such as NIST, how are they influencing the frameworks that you're building here at IFS?
Absolutely. We're building a little bit of headroom with our policies so that we can not be so constrained and build policies that are going to fail an ability to flex to the change of legislation and regulation that we're expecting. The EU AI Act is obviously very prominent, but actually it's very well considered in terms of how it's applied to the context that we are working in, i.e. heavily regulated organisations and verticals. So we're working towards the EU AI Act, but equally keeping the headroom there to consider global regulations so that we serve a global customer base and that actually we take best of breed. Ultimately, we are proactive in our approach. So we're getting ahead of these legislations and regulations and best practice before they actually become enforceable. And we're building a whole ecosystem with our partners to support that.
And you mentioned risk a couple of times then, which leads me nicely on to talking about, when we speak to customers, what would your advice be to those that want the benefits of AI but are potentially slightly nervous about risk and the compliance of using the technology?
So I would say everything should be a risk-based decision. I think if we're talking about verticals such as industrial, the context is key. So context is the real piece they need to fill in the blanks. General AI solutions are probably not specific or appropriate. So we need to look at real world use cases that affect the verticals and the challenges and the pain points that they're seeing in that.
And that has allowed me to segue beautifully into my last question. What is it that gives you confidence that industrial AI can be both powerful but also responsible at scale for our customers?
Yeah, so I think the results that we're seeing from the customers that we're working with, that's the empirical data that says it's working. The benefits that are being realised and the cost savings and the efficiencies that are being introduced. Not only that, it's the reduction in failure rates. So there are a whole number of different vignettes that we could talk from our client's perspective. I think what we've got to be mindful of is as we're developing AI solutions and we're supporting our clients with their adoption, is making sure that we have done everything that we've said and we have led by trust ourselves, which I'm seeing at IFS is very much a boardroom requirement now, and it's kind of communicated across the business that we need to be operating as we're expecting our clients to be adopting.
Great stuff. Well, Toby, thank you very much for joining me today.
No, thank you for having me.